I'm Celia Lucero. I've been a military nurse for 10 years, and I love what I do. But if you ask my family, they'd probably still say, I never lived up to my potential. My parents have always measured success in titles and salaries. My sister, Danielle, graduated from Yale Law and now runs her own firm in Manhattan. My little brother, Aaron, writes code for some fancy AI startup in San Francisco. At every family gathering, it's like they have this invisible scoreboard, and I've been losing since the day I signed up for nursing school. I remember one birthday dinner, maybe 5 years ago. It was supposed to be for me, but somehow the conversation never circled back to anything I did. Danielle had just closed a big case. Aaron was planning a move into venture capital. My dad kept saying things like, "That's the future. You kids are changing the world." I sat there with a slice of cake and a knot in my stomach, trying to smile like it didn't sting. No one asked about my patience. No one asked how I was holding up during back-to-back deployments. I think my mom said, "We're proud of your service," at one point, but it felt rehearsed, like she was quoting a Hallmark card. Then she turned to Danielle and asked what kind of shoes she was planning to wear for an upcoming gala. The thing is, I never expected applause. I just wanted them to care. I've seen soldiers come home in pieces. I've held the hands of young men shaking through trauma. I've done CPR in desert heat, stitched wounds while mortar fire rattled the ceiling. But none of that seemed impressive next to a courtroom win or a new job title. It's not like they were cruel. Not directly. It's more like I didn't fit. When I'd fly home for the holidays, there was always this polite but strained air about things. They'd make room at the table, but never in the conversation. My stories didn't sparkle the way Aaron's did. My uniforms didn't impress the way Danielle's power suits did. There was a time I tried to change that. I bought more stylish clothes, tried to talk about things they liked, startups, stocks, politics, but I always felt like I was speaking a second language, and no one wanted to slow down to understand me. Eventually, I stopped trying. I'd show up for birthdays, graduations, even funerals. I'd bring thoughtful gifts, ask everyone how they were, but every time, I'd leave feeling smaller than when I arrived. Like I was the background music to their main event. It got worse when I hit 30 and still hadn't settled down. My mom started hinting that maybe I'd focused too much on my career. My sister offered to set me up with someone from her gym, someone more my speed. I laughed it off, but inside, it felt like another jab. Being single somehow made me even more of a disappointment. There was never one big blowout. No screaming matches or ultimatums. Just 1,000 little cuts, missed calls, comments like, "You're still in that field?" Or, "You know you don't have to stay there forever." As if what I did was temporary. As if saving lives in a war zone was a detour on my way to something more normal. I think what hurt most wasn't what they said, but what they didn't. They never said, "We see you." Never said, "What you do matters." They'd smile when I arrived and hug me when I left, but in between, I felt invisible. Some nights, lying awake after a 14-hour shift, I'd replay those family dinners in my head. I'd wonder if I should have done something different, chosen a different path, a different life. But then I'd think about the soldiers who remembered my name, the kids I held through panic attacks, the thank you notes from families I'll never forget. And deep down, I knew I wasn't the one who needed to change. I just needed to stop asking people to value something they never cared to understand. I met Jason at the base hospital in Ramstein. It wasn't some grand moment. He was standing at the coffee machine, half awake, wearing scrubs and holding a chart under one arm. I was coming off a night shift, hair tied back, shoes aching, and somehow we ended up in line for the same stale pastry. He looked at me and said, "You've got that look." I raised an eyebrow, and he grinned. "I haven't slept in a week, and I don't want to talk about it look." I laughed because he was right. That was the first time I really noticed him. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. A hallway nod turned into shared lunches. Quick check-ins turned into long conversations during quiet shifts. He never asked me what rank I was or what my 5-year plan looked like. He asked what I missed most from home. What kind of music did I listen to when I stitched up wounds? What got me through the hard days? He had this calm energy that felt like a warm blanket after a storm. Other men I dated were always trying to impress me with stories or ambition. Jason never had to prove anything. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it felt like he actually meant every word. I remember one afternoon, we were watching a kid get airlifted after a bad accident. Jason didn't say much, just stood beside me. When the helicopter left, I turned to go back inside, and he handed me a water bottle. "You haven't blinked in 5 minutes," he said. "That can't be good for you." It was so small, but I felt more seen in that moment than I had in years. He never rushed me, never made me feel like I had to be lighter or quieter or easier to love. He accepted the parts of me I'd spent a decade trying to mute. The dark humor, the long silences, the way I shut down when I was overwhelmed. With him, none of that scared me. I once told him I wasn't used to feeling like enough. He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "Well, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." That was the moment I started to believe him. Bringing Jason home was my idea. I thought maybe if they met him, really met him, things would change. I pictured my mom smiling politely, my dad asking about his deployments, my sister trying not to dominate the conversation. What I got instead was something colder, polished, dismissive, in the way only family can be. We sat around the living room, coffee cups in hand, awkward laughter filling the space between questions. My dad asked what Jason did, and when he said he was a military doctor, there was a pause, just long enough to make it clear they expected more. "Oh," my mom said. "So, like, emergency stuff?" Jason nodded. "Trauma mostly. Field medicine. Some training." She smiled like she was being patient. "Interesting." Danielle, of course, couldn't help herself. She leaned forward, hands perfectly manicured, and said, "So do you ever think about, I don't know, transitioning into something more stable? Like private practice?" Jason just looked at her and said, "I think stability's overrated if you're not doing something that matters." She didn't respond, just sipped her wine like she'd been challenged. Aaron stayed on his phone most of the night. He barely made eye contact. When I asked him later what he thought, he shrugged and said, "He seems nice. Kinda quiet. Not really what I expected." The worst part wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't. No one asked how we met. No one asked what I loved about him. It felt like I'd brought home a placeholder, not a person. A passing phase they didn't have to take seriously. Jason handled it all with his usual calm. He smiled, answered questions, and helped clear the table. When we left, he thanked them for dinner. On the ride back, he didn't say much, just reached over and held my hand. That silence was heavier than any words he could have said. Later that night, I cried in the shower, not because they didn't like him, but because I saw it so clearly. No matter who I became or who I chose, it would never be enough. And for the first time, I stopped wanting their approval, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood how much it had cost me to keep asking for it. I sent the invitations with more hope than I should have allowed myself to have. I spent weeks choosing the design, the wording, even the paperweight. I wanted it to feel personal, like this was more than just an event. This was me saying, "You still matter to me, even after everything." I didn't hear anything for over a week. Then Danielle called, casually, like she was confirming lunch plans. "So, I got your invite," she said. Cute touch with the pressed flowers. I waited. "We're actually going to be in Paris that week. Family trip. It's been on the books for a while." I blinked, trying to process. "You can't reschedule?" She laughed. "Celia, it's Paris. You know how hard it is to get everyone together? Your wedding sounds cute, but Paris is Paris." I could feel my heart slow, like it was bracing for impact. I asked if they were all going, Mom, Dad, Aaron, and she said, Yeah, it'll be the four of us. Should be nice. You know how much Mom loves Europe. She didn't even ask how I was feeling. No apology. No hint of hesitation. When I called my mom, hoping maybe it was a misunderstanding, she sounded distracted. Sweetheart, you know we're proud of you, she said. But this trip has been planned for months. We figured the ceremony would be small anyway. I told her it would be. But that didn't mean it didn't matter. She paused, then said, Well, you've always been so independent. I figured you wouldn't need the fuss. I got off the phone before I said something I'd regret. I sat on the edge of the bed, the invitation box still open beside me, hands shaking in my lap. Jason came in, saw my face, and didn't ask anything. He just pulled me close. I didn't cry. I felt too hollow for that. We talked about postponing. Jason offered it more than once. But I told him no. This is about us, I said. Not them. He nodded and said, Then let's make it beautiful. Just the way we want. That night, I stared at the RSVP line on their untouched cards. I thought about all the birthdays, holidays, and graduations. All the times I'd shown up, hoping something would feel different. And now, on the one day that should have meant everything, they picked Eiffel Tower selfies over their own daughter's vows. It broke something in me. Not in a dramatic, crashing way. More like a quiet snap. The sound of something finally giving up after holding on too long. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I was just done. The morning of the wedding was quiet, almost sacred. The sun poured through the chapel windows in soft streaks, touching the white chairs and the simple floral arch we'd built together. I didn't feel nervous. I felt steady, calm in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't the wedding I imagined growing up, but it felt exactly right. Guests started to arrive, colleagues from the base, a few friends from deployment, even some older officers I barely knew. One by one, they hugged me like I mattered, like they weren't just showing up for Jason, but for us. No one asked about my family. No one pitied me. Then I saw Jason. He walked in wearing his dress uniform, polished and sharp, the kind that makes everyone stand up a little straighter. His chest was lined with ribbons I didn't recognize. His face was serious, proud, but his eyes never left mine. As he reached the altar, I heard a low murmur ripple through the seats. A colonel leaned toward another guest and whispered something. I caught only the end. Distinguished Service Cross. Didn't know he was still active. Another said, That's Lucero's fiancé? He's a legend in the field unit. I blinked, heart racing. Jason had always been private about his past. He talked about patience, never positions. Medals and rankings were just things, he'd said. Not the reason he served. But standing there, beside him, it all hit me at once. This man, this quiet, steady man, had done more than most people I knew would ever dream of. And he chose me. Not because I was impressive or polished or the kind of daughter that makes parents beam at cocktail parties. He chose me for the parts I never knew anyone could love. When we exchanged vows, my voice shook. Not from nerves, but from finally feeling full. For so long, I thought I had to earn love by becoming more, by fitting into someone else's mold. But in that chapel, surrounded by people who respected us not for status, but for substance, I let go of that old version of me. Jason looked at me and said, You've always been more than enough. And for the first time, I believed him. The calls started the day after the wedding. First, it was Danielle, her voice more upbeat than usual. Hey, just saw a post from someone at your wedding. Jason's in command? Why didn't you say anything? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to ask why it would have mattered. But I already knew. She kept going. I mean, wow, Distinguished Service Cross. Mom had no idea. She's kind of upset. We all are. If you told us, we would have come. I let her words settle, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. There was a time when that kind of admission would have meant everything. Now, it just sounded late. Then my mom called. She didn't lead with congratulations. She asked if it was true. Someone sent us photos. Jason looked so decorated. We had no clue. Why didn't you tell us who he really was? Her voice wasn't angry. It was embarrassing, like she was grasping for a way to save face. I told her the truth. You never asked. She paused, then tried again. Well, we'd like to do something. A dinner in the city. Make up for missing it. You can wear the dress again. Maybe invite some of his people. We'll do it right this time. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. A makeup celebration. As if presents could be retroactive. As if a party in Manhattan could undo the silence they chose. I thanked her for the offer. Told her we were heading out on a short trip and wouldn't be around. That part was true. But even if we weren't, I wouldn't have gone. I was done showing up for people who only valued what they could brag about. Jason didn't say much when I told him about the calls. He just nodded and said, "Let them spin." He understood better than anyone that some people only care once. There's something to gain. We sat on the balcony that night, legs tucked under a shared blanket, and watched the sun drop behind the trees. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because anything had been resolved, but because I'd finally stopped needing resolution. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need an apology wrapped in dinner reservations. I had chosen love without performance. Peace without permission. Later that week, a package arrived from my sister. Inside was a silver frame, engraved with our wedding date. No card, just the frame. I placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll use it, but not now. Now, I'm building a life where I don't have to fight to be seen. Where showing up isn't a favor, but a given. Where love doesn't wait for rank or titles or validation. They showed up, but only in the absence. And I'm not leaving room at the table anymore. Our honeymoon wasn't a grand escape. We didn't jet off to some island or five-star resort. Instead, we took a slow road trip through small towns, stopping wherever the view made us pause or the food smelled too good to pass up. We shared coffee with fellow veterans, laughed with strangers who felt like old friends, and watched the stars from the back of Jason's truck. There was no pressure to impress, no roles to play, just quiet joy in being with someone who saw me, chose me, and never asked me to shrink. Every mile we drove felt like shedding a layer of who I used to be. I wasn't the daughter trying to earn her place at the table. I wasn't the one chasing approval through silence. I was simply me, and that was finally enough. The people who stood with us at our wedding weren't tied to us by blood. But they showed up. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. That's family. It's the ones who stay, who see you, without asking you to explain. If you're listening to this and you've felt what I've felt, that quiet ache of being overlooked, of being told you're not enough in subtle ways, I want you to hear this. You don't need to keep proving yourself to people who never learned how to value you. Make your own circle. Love the ones who love you back, without conditions. Choose peace. Choose people who stay. Because sometimes, family isn't who you're born to. It's who you build.